think we basically covered from here all the way down through here. Now we haven't looked at every detail, but we've discussed it and you know what you're going to have to figure out and so on. But documentation, this is an important aspect of writing more sophisticated projects like these ones we've been doing. And so, starting with this assignment and all future assignments, I'll have you document what you're doing. All right, the first two were kind of just learning the basics, and now we're getting a little bit more mature and complexity, right? We're not just doing a couple little simple details, we're actually adding quite a bit of stuff. So I want you to explain all that stuff, and here's what I want explained. I want to know the name of your resource. So in my example, what is that?
Restaurants.
Restaurants. Or technically that's the collection. So restaurant or restaurants, I'm good with either. The name of each of its attributes. So you can throw the ID in if you want, but what I really care about is the name of the restaurant, the hours of the restaurant, the rating, whatever else you've got. You should have 5 of those, not counting the ID. So I just want to know what they are. It's literally just like, give me a list. It's just simple. Your schema. I really want you just to paste this from the .schema command, right? So if you forgot what it was, go type .schema in the SQLite tool in the terminal. I just want you to paste it in, make it look nice. I've got an example I'm going to show you. And then this is where people get a little confused, but it's not that big of a deal. I want all of your REST endpoints. That means all of essentially the questions and answers that go between your server and your client. So what is your server answering? What is your client asking? For example, I want to create a new restaurant. I want to update a restaurant. I want to delete a restaurant. And for each of these, I want the name. That would be retrieve collection, retrieve member, delete member, create member. The HTTP method, get, post. That isn't the name, right? The name is more descriptive than just get or post. There should be 2 that are get, right? 2 of those are get. And then the path, /restaurants, /restaurant/ID. Okay, just a placeholder. Okay, to do this, we're going to use Markdown, GitHub flavored Markdown, which GitHub supports. This is how GitHub formats all of its pages online. And it's also a great way to just generally take notes and document things in general. Markdown is a markup language. It's a spin on the term markup. They call it Markdown. But anyway, what's a markup language? What's the most common markup language? HTML is a markup language, right? It's not a programming language, it's a markup language. This is just an overly simplified one that helps you just quickly knock out nicely formatted stuff. And GitHub will display it as HTML with CSS. I'll show you an example. But that link right there will teach you all the nuts and bolts. It's really simple, right? This is stuff you could easily introduce to a 3rd grader to introduce them to technology, right? This isn't exactly that hard. I actually gave you a sample, not so much so that you can learn Markdown, but more so that you can see what I'm asking for as a visual example. And I want this on your GitHub repo. The file you'll name is readme.md, MD for Markdown. And that's just so that GitHub will show it. I'll show you what I mean. And then, you'll throw that up with GitHub. I actually don't accept any pass-offs until I see this first. So if you're like, hey, I just have to, put that up. Okay, fine, I want to talk to you. So when you come on Friday, don't forget I want this up. And I actually want to see it so that I know what's going on before and not after the fact. And I don't want to see it in your editor, right? I don't want to see your HTML, I want to see, or your Markdown, I want to see it displayed so I can actually read it. So if you click on this first link, it's going to show you, well, it'll explain what it is. And this is GitHub's page, but GitHub doesn't own Markdown. They just use it, okay? So if you read here, they'll be like, okay, cool. Like if you want to italicize something, you're going to put asterisks. If you want to hyperlink, you'll do it like this. If you want bold, right? And so this is the Markdown. This is what it looks like. And so I don't want to see this. I want to see this. I want to see it uploaded to GitHub. They show you how to do headings and emphasis, like italics and bold. They show you to do basic lists. They're literally just like, it's all text, right? It's Markdown. It's markup. So it's just text, except way simpler than most, okay? Syntax highlighting, I'd like you to use that when you do your SQL so I can see your schema that's not ugly. It's not ugly, it's just nice and formatted. I'll ask you to make a table, if you will, please, when you implement that very last thing, which was the endpoints, so I get all those in an easy to read form, right? And there's lots of stuff. You can kinds of fun things like emoji. And that's all great, but that's going to essentially teach you the specifics. As you click through these tabs, they have all kinds of examples. Better yet, I've given you an example of what I'm looking for content-wise. So if you click this other link right here, I've got a GitHub page that's public. And imagine your code is here as well, but of course I just have one file, README. And if you have a README, GitHub displays it automatically, right? It's here, right? So anytime you go to GitHub and you read, that's what you're reading is Markdown. This isn't Markdown, this is displayed in the DOM. If you click on the file, to actually see it, you might have to click this button that says raw. So click on that. And you can actually read my original Markdown. And that's all it is, right? So it's kind of fun. You've got text. The hashtag is a heading. More hashtags, we get a smaller heading or a deeper heading. I bolded restaurant. The asterisks here are a list. The backticks with SQL do syntax highlighting. So this will, like that could be Python, but it's SQL. And then this is a table, right, with the hyphens and vertical bars with the headings for my table, and then kind of each. So it's like really simple stuff. What that ends up looking like then is this. And I would like yours to look similar. Hopefully you spend more than 30 seconds on this and make sure your content is solid. But I'd like to see your resource, restaurant, your attributes, right, whatever they are. I just pasted this in. Notice it looks nice and readable. It's not all in one line and looks atrocious, so I can actually read it without my eyes hurting. And then down here, kind of what I was saying before, the name, retrieve collection is get on restaurants, retrieve member is get on restaurants with an ID at the end, etc. It's not exactly asking for much. I just want it nice and clean. That's what's important. So I know what's going on. And on the next assignment, you'll just create one of these as well with some new stuff. Okay. All right, so that's that. Do you guys have any questions on what I'm looking for?
Where's the README? Like, where do you make your own?
It's just a file. It's just a file called readme.md, and you just throw it in the root of your repository.
You just make it yourself?
Yeah, I just made it and uploaded it. So I did this on my computer, and then when I push, this file exists. For you, you'll have this, and then probably a client and server folder right here. So you just throw it in at the top of your repository. Cool. Yeah, but it's literally just a text file. Some editors are really cool, and they'll even give you a live preview as you're typing. It'll actually preview the Markdown so that you don't have to push it up to GitHub to see what it looks like. And on that note, make sure you actually, like, you'd be surprised how many students will just like type in a bunch of muddly mess and then push it up, and then they gotta pass off, and I'm like, why does it look like crap? And they're like, I don't know, I never really actually looked to see what it looked like. I'm like, well, okay. See ya. That's basically what I say. I'll come back to me when you figure out how to check your own work, kind of thing. Okay. Well, that's that. Hopefully you see some value in that. If someone else comes into your project, obviously not an end user, this is a developer's document, right? Like, what's going on, right? How do you work with my app, internally or externally, right? If you had an API you were publishing, this is what they want to see, right? How do I get your stuff? Let me know how to do it, and then they'll know. If it's private or internal, then your team will know. Either way, this isn't exactly a lot of documentation, and the more data you have, the more you'll have to document across the board. So, kind of high level, database level, and API level. That's the idea. Okay, yeah, there you go. So you can put other stuff in here too if you want. It's actually great for notes as well. The very best, in my opinion, the very best like in-class like electronic note-taking system I've ever seen is Markdown, right? Just have a file on your computer and take notes, and you can just put in quick little symbols here and there, save it, and then you can go read it in a formatted way, just on your own computer, right? So it's really cool for that too. All right, so yeah, Markdown. If you have questions working on it, just let me know. I've given you examples, so I imagine it won't be hard to follow. So now I can say that I've covered everything I intended to, unless I intentionally didn't, like update, or in case I missed something. Did I miss anything? Is there anything we should go over again? Anything that we need to review, or maybe some questions you've got? Any questions with update?
I do have a question. When interfacing with SQLite, I just kind of got confused on the actual update, like command that we put in. It didn't seem to be like working with the question mark format that you showed us before.
Okay, was this in the SQLite tool, or was this?
No, from the Python like.
Oh, okay. So in Python, let me write it in Python. Go away. Let me open it. Oh, sorry. Let's see. It's actually open. Sorry, database file. With the new thing, I don't know how to even turn the volume down. It's fantastic. Okay, so let's say you were going to delete a restaurant. Or I'm sorry, update a restaurant. So you would have something like this. So you're still going to have data and all that. There's one additional data piece you're going to have. What is it? The ID. You have to have this and the ID. Okay, let me at least write the query for you, and then you can compare with what your query was. Okay, so update restaurants set. What are my data pieces? Name, rating, hours. That's where the first set of question marks come in, and then what? What comes after that?
ID.
What's that?
Where.
Where ID equals, okay. That's what you're looking for. It's basically what I wrote on the board, except with the question marks. Is that what you have, and it's not working?
Oh yeah, I was just trying to do it like we did insert into above, and that's
Yeah,
what it
it's
was.
different.
Okay.
It's different. I did put this on the board, right? Pretty sure I did, yeah. So, update, table, set, and then it totally different. This is where it totally gets different. Field equals value, comma, field equals value. And then you constrain it to a particular record. So data is going to have to be these, except where will the ID be in this list then? The last one. Yeah, it has to be, because you have to put it in the order of the question marks. Yeah, and if you can get that ID in there, you're set, right? That's what makes it different. It's like insert with an ID and the totally different syntax on the SQL.
So is there definitely not a comma between the like hour equals question
No,
and where?
no more commas at that point. Yeah, just in between the sets. Yeah, and of course you don't set the ID. That would be weird. Leave the ID, set everything else where the ID is question mark. Yeah, so data is the same. Don't forget the commit. I've seen it's easy to leave off, right? And then you're scratching your head like crazy. Why isn't this working? Because you don't get any errors. It just doesn't work. So don't forget that. Put the ID right there. You're good. Okay. Any other questions with update? No, I'm not going to continue writing all the code for you, but I can answer questions. In fact, I was thinking of giving you some general tips. So on the server is pretty straightforward. Once you get this, right? I don't want that to be a mystery, right? That's probably brand new for some of you, so that's not supposed to be the mystery. The mystery is how do you glue all this stuff together. So on the server, the other file, your server py, you need to think of it like this, right? This is what you got to think about. Update equals create plus delete. You kind of got to merge those two together to get update, right? You're not deleting anything, but syntax-wise and in terms of the code, you're kind of mashing these together. For example, I don't have delete, do I? So I'll use retrieve. You can say delete or retrieve, remember? So if I were to take this insert and I were to mash it together with this get one, it's kind of what I'm doing, right? I've got to have all of the data and I have to have the ID. And that's all I mean when I say it's kind of like create and delete. You've got to have the create with all the data, so you've got a body and you've got to read the body, and you've got to get the content length, almost verbatim with create. And then once you've got the data, you're not just going to insert it, you actually have to get the ID and then pass all of it in to this method here. So you've got to do all the things, right? It's the most sophisticated one, technically speaking. All right, you've got to have the body, you've got to have the path with the ID. So as we go look on the server now, all right, so here's retrieve member, which is again very similar to delete. Hopefully you've got delete working by now. If you don't, you're definitely behind. Retrieve member has the restaurant ID, and that happened all the way down here with the whole path stuff, right? So all that stuff applies for update 2, because your path is going to be just like delete or retrieve. Right, you're going to have some ID there. And so that's similar, but that's not there on create. Create doesn't have an ID. But yet, at the same time, if we look at create, it doesn't have an ID, but create has all this body stuff. You've got to read all this body stuff. And so that's present on create, but not on delete, because you don't have a body you have to read with delete. And that's all I mean. You're going to have to take kind of all of the things. There's like almost nothing missing. You've got to have all these things to make update work. That said, there's nothing really new on the server. There's not something you're going to have to figure out that's brand new. It's just you're going to have to take all the concepts you've learned and shove them into one box. Okay. Server isn't the trickiest. It's actually the client that's trickiest for update. And it's just a little, not a lot, just a little tricky. You guys good with this? Stop me if you have questions. The tip I wanted to give you is on the client. I'm just going to whiteboard this. I can almost see it from last time. So let's say you've got on your page, if this is your browser, let's say you've got your list, right? You've got your heading and all this, and you've got your list of restaurants, and it's got a few buttons. It's got the edit button and the delete button, and you've got lots of restaurants here. That's supposed to be a pencil, right? Because it's edit, okay. And that's my delete button. So you've got lots of records here. You've got a few buttons for each one. Get rid of it, edit it. Right, and then maybe up here you've got an add button to create a new one. And then, I'm just totally saying this is how I would imagine this. You probably looks totally different. And then, whether I click add you've already done and that's working. But let's say I click edit. We talked about last time how to make edit and delete buttons work in the first place. We talked about those contexts and having listeners inside of our loop and closures and all that good stuff. So we already talked about that, but let's say you click the button. I want to make sure, first of all, you know what's supposed to happen. A form will show up, right? And you can save it, but this form is going to have little fields in here, like for the name and for the hours and for the rating or whatever, right? So you've got your little things and whatever else you've got, right? Lots of data that you're going to be editing. When I click add, this is going to be empty, right? Totally empty, create a new thing. When I click edit, this is supposed to be filled in. Don't miss that. We talked about that. Because if I have to fill everything in again just to fix a typo, I'll probably have more typos. So let the fields be pre-filled so that when I click save, all the data gets sent still, but I don't have to do extra work. The user doesn't have to go and re-enter everything. That's stupid. That wasn't the point. Might as well just delete it and re-enter it at that point. Why do I even have update in the first place? That would literally be easier. So, pre-fill the fields, and that's not too bad. When I click on this button, I have all the data, we showed that, all the data is available when I click that button because of what we talked about last time. So the filling in the fields isn't that hard. You just have to query the field and make sure you know how to change a field, right? Field dot value equals something, and this is going to be the data that exists in your object, right? So definitely make sure you know how to pre-fill a field. That's like this. It's the same way you clear a field. How do you clear a field? Sum field dot value equals empty string, empty quotes, empty string. So that's how you clear it. But if you want to set it, you just give it some other string, like my restaurant dot name. Okay, would go here. Okay, so that isn't tricky. Maybe you're figuring that out, but it's not tricky. It's pretty straightforward. So pre-filling the form, that's not too bad. Here's where it gets interesting. When I click delete, I have the ID, I send it out to the server, the thing gets deleted, and I refresh and I'm done. It's like a one-step thing. Delete, done, reload, cool. With edit, it's like, okay, edit, wait, hold on, not talking to the server yet, I've got to show this. And then you kind of just like tap your toe and wait, because the user has to go in and now do something else. So all of a sudden you're not just like cruising on with life, you're like, well, wait, hold on, now we're waiting again. So they got to make whatever changes, who knows, and then click the button now, right? And so it's a two-step. You've got to click this button, then wait, let them do their thing, then click another button. Or heck, maybe they don't do anything. Maybe they click edit and then touch this or not, and they don't ever click this button. They click this one and do something else. You don't even know if they're going to do this. So because of that, like step one, click this button, step two, click this button, maybe. It's a little trickier for one reason. Anybody know what the reason is? There's really only one gotcha of that. Yeah, it's a little bit more work. And you gotta pre-fill the field. Yeah, it's more work, definitely more work. But what's the gotcha? There's just one. Anybody got it? Anybody done this? Who's done this? Who's done with update? Nobody's done with update. Good thing we're having a work day. Anything else? Any ideas? I'll tell you. When you click this little edit button, you've got all the data right here, okay? And that's why you shove it all into the fields. So you've now nice and tidily saved all the data of which they're going to edit. What other things do you need when you try to send this off to the server to update? What do you need other than these things?
Index and ID.
The ID, not the index, but the identifier out of the database. So between here and here, it's possible, in fact likely, that you've lost it. You've lost that context. You had it here. They clicked the button, you knew. Just like you knew the name, you knew the ID. It's all there, I promise. It's all right there in that big loop. And you're gonna pre-fill one field and probably do this like 5 times, done, 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 done. But I told you, I don't wanna see the ID in a form field anywhere. I don't wanna see the ID anywhere unless it's debugging code, right? Get rid of those, get them off the page. I don't wanna see any identifiers. That's not for the user, that's for you. So if you don't display it and you don't have a field for it and you lose it, what do you do? That's the problem. What do you do? How do you not lose the identifier between this step and this step? You gotta keep it, otherwise what are you gonna do? You'll end up creating a new one or something. You don't have an ID. What do you do? Throw it in a variable. Throw it in a global variable. I have a recommendation. Edit ID, right? It can be null for a minute, that's fine. Just let it be a global variable at the tippy top of your code. You can do this a few different ways, by the way. This is not the only way to do this. You can actually use this strategy, or you can get fancy with closures that we talked about last time. There's actually another way to do this. But this is the easiest. Well, I don't know. The other way is not. This is probably the most conceptually easiest. You just have a variable. When you click on this button, you're going to put all of the data pieces into the fields like that, and then you're going to say edit ID equals restaurant.id, yeah, and you're going to save it. Then when you click this button, you've got all the fields with the changes. You've got the ID that didn't change. You just saved it for a minute, and now you can go to the server with all of the data out of the fields and the ID, which goes in the URL, okay, like this. ID goes back in the URL. Data goes into the body. Don't put the ID in the body. Don't ever put the ID in the body. It always goes here. Okay, don't forget that part. And that's about it, right? If you remember to put the ID right here back in, that's the thing you gotta not lose. That's why we have a global variable. Then you're good. That's really, quite honestly, the only gotcha in doing edit or update. It's the only one that I have discovered. Everything else you might need to figure out or remember how to do it. It's relatively straightforward. That one not so much. You gotta remember, you gotta save it. Otherwise, you can't really do it.
Yeah, right now I'm using text input boxes. Is that different from forms?
Oh no, like, you're just saying this.
Yeah.
So type equals text or number or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, that's all I'm expecting.
Okay. So there's not like a forms HTML thing that
Like
has to do
this?
with like the sum field value and stuff like that.
Yeah, like this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, not only no, you don't need it, you don't want it. I probably haven't said this, and I should have already. Some of you have hit this issue. You actually, not only do you not need it because you're using Ajax, that's why you don't need it, but you don't want it. Get rid of it, put a div or something there as a container. Here's why you don't want it. Not just because you don't need it. You don't want it because if it's present, the browser, when you click a button inside that form, the browser actually tries to submit the form old school way, and it'll cause your page to like refresh, is usually what happens. And then you like get totally confused because you're like, what is going on? Nothing's working. Or maybe it's working, but it's like flashing and doing weird junk. So please, right now, go in and just replace your form tag, if you have one, with a div. Your inputs, don't change those, and your buttons and all that stuff, that's fantastic. There's really no other way to do it. But get rid of your form if you've got it. If you don't, you're good. If you do, rename it to a div and be done. Yeah, that gets actually way more people. I'm glad you asked. That gets way more people than you'd think, because it's natural, right? I have a form. But it ends up being very, very odd in how the browser deals with that. Okay, seems like I had another tip. As you're working on this, I'll say it again, make sure you're not dividing things out into 2 or 3 pages. I don't want to have one HTML file for this and one for this. No, it really just is one HTML document, but things are going to hide and show. Right? We talked about that with display none and display block. So there's that. No form tags. I think that's pretty much all my advice. I know I'm not writing code, that's on you to do that. This is the only thing really that'll be a gotcha. Something like that. And then later you'll say edit ID equals, oops. Something like that maybe. Somewhere. You've got to glue it all together, right? I've given you all kinds of different fancy Legos. You've got to put them all together and hopefully look like something cool to them, okay? Don't forget to skimp on your UI. If you haven't written a lot of CSS so far, it's fine. You've got a few days. That's why I'm making sure you budget enough time to get all this stuff done. Cool. The rest of the day, unless you guys have questions for me right now, I just want to spend helping you guys out, coming around. That is also the plan for Wednesday. This isn't a great day to, not do your homework because now you've got a whole hour to work on it Wednesday morning. Probably the wrong idea. You should probably bring your stuff Wednesday, or now, so that I can help you, right? If you have nothing that you need help with and you're all done Wednesday, probably no need to show up. We'll do pass-offs on Friday if you're done already. That's good job. And I'm sure most of you are gonna have questions, especially when you get to edit and update. That's not as easy. Don't forget your CSS, don't forget your documentation with that README thing we just looked at, and don't forget to test it. And don't forget that Postman exists, right? And you can test things. And don't forget about your 404 requests. Can anybody summarize all the different 404 requests you're gonna have?
Not the right collection.
Not the right collection, like /lasagna, not gonna happen, 404. And that's on a get and a post and a delete and a put and all those. What are the other variety?
It's a bad idea.
Yeah, so the right collection with the wrong identifier. So if the path is altogether junk, right, / movie theaters, nope, 404. But even if this part's okay, restaurants, that's fine. If I'm trying to delete 1, 2, 3, 4, and I only have like 2 restaurants, that's another 404. Same thing when you retrieve a member, same thing when you delete a member, same thing when you update a member. So there are at least 7 instances of a 404 request that I can count. Yeah, that's probably all I'll actually look at is those 7. Anything else, whatever you want to do. But you should have at least 7 possibilities, and you're not going to be able to test that very easily from your HTML and JavaScript, right? because you shouldn't be able to delete something that doesn't exist. There might be a few loopholes in that. You might be able to figure out. For the most part, you'll test your 404s just like last time. Please test with Postman. If you want the points, it's probably worth opening up Postman one more time when you're done and double checking that your 404s work. That's what I'm gonna do, so it's probably what you should do. You'd be surprised, like I told you before, how many times I take away points because silly little 404 stuff. That's just not worth losing points over. It's so easy. Okay, if you need some code of mine, I think I posted a lot of it, but maybe not every piece. So if there's like a little piece of code that you realize you didn't have very good notes on, just shoot me a message or ask me today and be like, hey, can I see this part? Or can you send me this snippet? And then I'll make sure you have an example. I tend to, at this stage, not just post the whole thing because it's now like more than half done. But I'm not stingy, I'll still share. I don't want to hold code hostage, right? We went over all of it, so if there's something you need to see, let me know. Okay, we've got 15 minutes. Let me know how I can help you. If not, show up Wednesday and let's continue making sure you're where you need to be. Friday's a pass-off day. Monday is a exam review day. Okay, cool. We're almost to spring break. We'll make it, I promise.